Thank you.
So our next speaker will be Maia Nartoomid, and Maia is a Mysterium Teacher under the etheric Temple of Thoth. She's a spiritual consultant, an Akashic translator reader, and a digital artist. And she has been a scribe of Thoth since she has been very, very young. And so what I'd like to do is bring Maia on right now and have her to share her amazing story about the Talika and the essence and the, I guess you would say, the unraveling of the soul. Hey, Maia.
Hi. Oops, your audio left. I can't hear you.
Are you ready to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I guess so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
So I'm on? Yes.
You're on.
Okay. Well, I've been doing this sort of thing consciously for about 54 years now. And because I started when I was 17, but I had many experiences as a child and all of that, you know, like many of us did. And I do want to talk about the Talika, which is something that I brought through from Thoth, my mentor, my inner planes mentor, and his Akasha, probably about 18 to 20 years ago. Now, there's a lot to it. It's very complex in a way. And I have not really, it's the only time in all my work with him that he brought up walk-ins. So I'm not really familiar with this. Bear in mind, I have 54 years of stuff to look through. So I found this and I dug it up and we did it for, you know, some of it for Sheila's book. So it's not like I can sit here and go, oh, you know, and I have all this to share with you on it because it's one little piece of, you know, a huge volume of work, but I think it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to share it with you. But before I do, I'm going to just very briefly, I was just practically suspended listening to Gail's. I only got in at the tail end, but I got to see the video, you know, with the trip to Egypt and her whole story there. Just beautiful. And when my former husband, Simeon, and I co-facilitated a journey to Egypt under the guidance of Thoth in 1997, we went into we did go to the Temple of Isis, but we also went, you know, into the Great Pyramid and into the King's Chamber. And it was, we were the only group in there of about 16 of us. And it was a full moon, and at midnight we went in and we had till 3 in the morning, just us. We had them turn those loud fans off and all the electricity. We had candlelight. And Thoth had given each of us what he called an arc name, which is really just a series of vocables that are combined for each person in a different way. And so each of us would lie in the sarcophagus while we all chanted. They would chant their arc name first for quite a few times. And then we would all chant Soma Christu, I've forgotten how many times. And then the next person would get in the next. And so somewhere along the line, as the energy built, all of us started hearing chanting from someplace else. First, there was a ratting sound, kind of like, you know, instruments playing, like ancient little tinkles and bells and things. And then some voices came in. They sounded rather masculine. And we all heard it, so much so that the Egyptian guide totally freaked. And he was an educated fellow in the US. He was educated in the US and a college guy, but he just, he left. And so this went on for a while. And then all of a sudden the lights came on, the sounds came on, and we were like, what happened? This wasn't part of the agreement. So to make a long story short, what had happened was that that these men with suits and ties, this is in the middle of the night now, in I swear to you, long black limousines, 2 of them, 2 limousines, I don't remember how many men, suit and ties, Egyptians, showed up, and they told the guy that was, you know, outside managing things to come in and tell us that we had to leave right then. We had to get out right then. And the lady that was really sort of facilitating our whole gathering in regard to, you know, details and getting things together. A friend of ours, she went out to talk to them and they said, you must go. And she said, no, we're not leaving until our time is up. And she stood right in the passageway and they couldn't get by her without touching her, and they wouldn't do that. So when we finally came out, she was just, tears were streaming. She was shaking all over. And there stood these Egyptian guys in these suits and ties, and the Cadillac, the black car sitting out in the distance, you know, two of them. And they said, you must leave now. And we said, yeah, okay, we're finished. And we left. But anyway, I just had to share that because listening to Gail's beautiful story, you know, just things happen in Egypt. There's no question about it when you're connecting and, you know, calling upon spirit like that. Okay, so that's my little story. And I know I don't have a huge amount of time here, but here's the thing. Because this is so intricate, I'm going to have to read some of it to you. There's just no way around it. It's not something I'm versed in. It's not one of my subjects that I talk about all the time, you know, and I'm just going to have to read a little bit of it to you because most of Thoth's work is highly scientific. And so here we go. The first stage of the sacred procedure of the Talika is activated from the id, I-I-D. You can visualize the id as a pyramid-shaped energy system that is in and of itself an intelligence. This intelligence, composed of the consciousness of highly evolved beings in the universe that are known to us through biblical interpretation as the Elohim. The Elohim are the worker bees of the creation universe. The creation universe is the matrix in which other universes, including our own, are given the light mathematical codes for existence. So the id then is an energy pyramid containment field for the highly evolved intelligence and consciousness of the universal builders or Elohim of the creation universe. The id intelligence is in constant symbolic contact with all souls in all universes. It therefore is what you might call the command center for the evolutionary experiential flow of all souls. The concept may be staggering to our linear way of thinking, but we must understand that the incredible number of souls involved means nothing to the greater realities which move with the one consciousness. As Thoth has told me, only the matter-bound must count the sheep to know how many they are or where they pasture. The id is at one with every single sheep. Yet each soul is very individualistic in its incarnational passage as it moves into realms that separate, distinguish, select, and individuate all experience. The soul must become one among many in order to find its way back to the eternality of the one. The id evaluates the individual process and creates pathways into matter realities for each soul. As all souls stem from the one, in order to move forward in cohesion with such a process as reincarnation and not create chaos and thus even further separation from source, the id uses light code bonding to bring souls together into units that are able to fit with other units, similar to a child's building blocks, until all souls are ultimately linked through families. Though this giant family tree is still one within the greater template, with the more extreme divisions taking place only in the final resolutions of the matter experience. The id is continually cognizant of the light codes in all stages of the soul's evolution, or what we would define as past, present, and future, and it then links that soul to its unit or grouping of souls. Souls will eventually become part of different units as they evolve, but only when they reach levels far beyond those available upon Earth. In other words, souls incarnating on this planet have been and will be in the same soul unit throughout their Earth experience. To clarify this a bit, there are many soul groupings present within the Earth experience, but the souls that belong to them will remain so during their incarnational sojourn here. There are exceptions to this rule, but they are extremely rare and elaborate and are not within the immediate scope of this reading here. Before continuing, we must differentiate a true soul unit of the id called a sati, meaning light cocoon, and that of a lesser grouping of souls called a manika, who have collected on the inner planes and incarnate to work out a karmic scenario. This latter soul assembly is an expedient gathering, which is temporary in our linear way of thinking and being of karmic circumstance. The manika is not always perfectly aligned to the greater evolution. In one karmic grouping, several different manika are very likely to be represented. Now I know this is a bit complex, so stay with me here. We're going to get to the walk-ins. Now let us move further into the incarnational pattern. A non-incarnated aspect of a soul is the magna soul. The magna itself does not enter human experience, at least not with its entire containment field. It projects a beam or ray of energy down into a physical biosystem as a lesser representation of its being. While most souls on Earth experience but one physical embodiment in a specific time zone, there are souls which will beam into two or more embodiments within the same linear time frame or into parallel realities. And I know now, actually I knew this then, but somehow it didn't get into the article, that we can have other incarnations in other fields of experience that are still connected to us. Like for instance, I'd like to give an example. This is for me personally. I'm aware of a life that I'm living, you could say, while I'm living this one, as a being on a starship that's helping the Earth. Now, is that really in our time zone? Well, it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. And Thoth calls those subtle changes, like a ripple on the stream. You know, you have the body of water and then you have the ripple like this. And so there's a little bit of difference. And it's the same thing with the embodiment I'm aware I have concurrent with this one in the inner earth, because the hollow earth is slightly removed dimension, but not a fully different dimension. And the one in the inner earth I've been aware of since I was a child. I named my doll after her. So I didn't know she was in the inner earth at the time, but in just my young adulthood, in my early 20s, I did. So that gives you an example of how various, you know, this all can be. Of course, now I lost my place. Let's see. Okay, singular incarnation is given linear time zone, in a given linear time zone is entrophic. A soul may have several entrophic incarnational journeys and then experience a series of ambionic ones. This would be due to either a decision to adjust karmic stability with a greater rapidity or to the soul assuming a specific type of incarnational role for planetary transformational purposes. I think I missed something here because I didn't say what ambionic is. Okay, let's go back to that. Okay, here we go. That's a long sentence here. Just one second, let me find it. There are souls which will beam into two or more embodiments within the same linear time frame or into two parallel realities, as I read. Thus, a magna could be reaping incarnational experience in China, North America, and France, all at the same period. This form of incarnational integration is called ambionic, and the singular incarnation in a given time zone is called entrophic. So I'm not sure what would qualify in my case, because I'm giving it just an example, and it's not a rarity, believe me, but you know that I have this star being one and the one in the inner earth that are slightly interdimensional. I don't really know if they qualify as which one. Probably ambionic, I'm guessing at this point. Now I'm going to skip a little bit here because this is a long article and going, okay, here we go. There's another incarnational pattern called diatronic, meaning that the souls within this field are multidimensionally dispersed in their incarnating cycles. A few souls incarnated on Earth are involved in diatronic experience. A soul may be both ambionically and diatronically inclined, however. Thus they will tend to not only incarnate with multiplicity in one time zone, but in various dimensions or planes of being also, which are linked to that time zone. Aha, that's what would categorize this thing that I'm talking about, where it's slightly different dimension, but still, still connected. I think that might do it. Okay. For each point in time, there are multiple referencing strands or links which connect to other realms of experience. These links are formed when that point in time contains information that is related or relevant to the other dimension. This sets up matrices which hold other variable states for souls to experience incarnationally. As an example, let us follow the incarnational pattern of a magnasoul A. It beams into two separate life presences within the same time zone as embodiments, 1 and 2, but also moves diatronically into 5 alternate realities which link to that same time zone. In these alternate realities, this soul is living on Earth in various parallel embodiments. Yet these Earth sojourns are not in the same dimension of reality as the embodiment 1 and 2. Such a consideration shakes the very foundation of what we consider real, of what we know as history, and of how we relate to our reality. The incarnational experiences which Magnasoul A elicits is the diatronic experience. In the diatronic experience are just as vital and as real as the ones it creates in the ambionic as embodiment 1 and 2, or even in the entrophic, should it have chosen that experience. Okay, I know this is going in your brain right now. It's going that way in mine too. The point is that we're just all over the place. We're just all over the place, but it's not chaotic. It's not chaotic. It follows a pattern. It's a giant computer in a way, but we think, oh, we don't want to be part of a computer. But you see, computers and the whole technology of the internet and all of this is actually a reflection, a very poor reflection, very tiny reflection, a very one-dimensional reflection, but nevertheless a reflection of the actual workings of the universe. And I read, not recently, it was a few years ago, that they had discovered that the universe thinks in ones and zeros. Now, I'm not going to go into that. I can't even if I wanted to, but they have come up with that mathematically, that the universe thinks in ones and zeros. Well, of course, those are the components of creating computer code. So that's why this is kind of difficult to read, because it's like going into the nuts and bolts of how this actually works, if you really want to know it. Now we approach another possible area of incarnational experience, which is that of soul layering or latticing. Several souls, which are usually, but not always, from the same sati or soul unit, will sometimes share incarnational experience with one biological system, within one biological system, i.e. a singular human being. This is called soul latticing. In this situation, there will be only one body soul, which is the soul actually projected into the physical system. The other souls, which lattice to the body soul, connect energetically and etherically to the biosystem through that soul. It is somewhat like a skydiving team, holding hands in a formation as they drop through space. One wrong move, and the whole formation would become imbalanced and possibly perish. Similarly, the soul team in the lattice must maintain specific balance patterns, beginning with the number and arrangements of the souls in the lattice. In the Earth's incarnational flow within our present stage of planetary evolution, the number of souls in a lattice must be 3, 5, or 7. The arrangement of souls in a lattice is accomplished in consciousness through a particular relationship to one another. And although it is not a spatial relationship, it aligns to sacred geometric design through orientation within its spatial flow. How then do the laws of cause and effect work within such multiple system of decision-making and action in a latticed soul experience? The body soul generally makes decisions that are in the greatest degree of polarity, such as what to eat, where, like, dislike, fear, etc. These are choices stemming from the emotions of the lower magnetic body. The body soul is the closest link to this force field and therefore the most interactive with it. The higher on the totem pole of the lattice, the soul is in order of arrangement, the greater the spiritual recursion present and acted upon. This recursion is a fine-tuning system which forms a movement up and down the pillar of connectiveness between all lattice souls, including the body soul. This hierarchical staging allows these souls to work in harmony, each tending a separate patch of the garden. Obviously, this type of arrangement requires a high calibration of spirit to matter synchronicity. This means that most of the souls in the lattice are rather highly evolved in order to perform the dance. But not all of the souls layered need to be so evolved. At least one is often a less aware soul who has reached the threshold of the greater experience and is being given an opportunity to advance by linking into a commanding matrix of master soul experience. Usually, latticed soul experiences are those which have a highly viable profile, such as Merlin. Merlin was a 5-soul lattice with Thoth as one of those entities. Ironically, Thoth is a 1-soul, he tells me, and not a latticed entity, but he has gone into lattices many times, and one of them was with the entity we call Merlin, the real guy, not the legendary one. On rare occasions, souls which are spiritually disabled will also be allowed to lattice. The disabled souls are beings which were once highly evolved, but have since become distortions of their original presence. Thus, they can still maintain a semblance of lattice structure, but it is always quite far out of balance as compared to a healthy, synergistic latticing. And I believe this is done, it's rare, but it's done because the soul had once been in such a high level of experience, not high like Thoth or, up there, but, it was really getting into there. And then it took a bad turn. And it's like, okay, you're getting a little grace factor here. Let's help you. Let's build it back a little bit. So it's a very guided thing. And generally, it's very carefully done. It's also quite rare. Because most soul lattice embodiments are high profile individuals, they usually become archetypes. As archetypes, many other souls can identify with them and the divine characteristics they represented. For this reason, the soul latticed embodiment or personality will often have numerous souls within its field of radiance feeding from its incarnational experience, although they are not able to affect or alter that evolution. These feeding souls are in direct archetypal receipt of that life experience. Even in situations where an embodiment is creating an archetype through its incarnational experience, which is the result of a singular soul and not a soul attached lattice arrangement, a band of archetypal groupies will generally still gather in the field of radiance. Thoth is in his best known incarnation as Same, was a singular soul and not a lattice, yet he is also a very strong archetypal being, and thus has a band of souls who strongly identify with him, generally known as the children of Thoth. Haha. Well, so to go back to this for a minute, let's just sort it out for a second. Most likely, everybody listening to this broadcast, including me, are not involved in having lattice souls. I mean, you could be, but it's a very delicate process, and generally it's very high profile souls with that little bit exception that he talked about. However, you can be what Thoth calls archetypified with one of these beings. For instance, let's say, there's a zillion people out there that think they're Mary Magdalene. And I'm not putting that down, but the point is, there's a lot of archetypification around Mary Magdalene, especially at this time. I've even had men tell me they felt like they were Mary Magdalene. They didn't exactly believe it, but they said, oh, I just feel like it. So it's not disqualifying it. It's just saying that you can archetypify with someone, a figure from the past, someone like Isis, or Thoth, or Cyrus, or whatever, and it doesn't mean you are that entity. It doesn't even mean you're latticed with that entity. It just means that you are archetypifying with it. And it's a very valuable way to experience that energy. So Anyway, let's continue. Somebody tell me when my time is up. We're getting to walk-ins here. Let me see, man, I might skip some of this. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip that. Let's go over here. Here we are, walk-ins. Now we move on to the category known throughout the metaphysical community as walk-ins. Walk-ins are identified as souls which have traded places upon agreement with a soul currently inhabiting a body. Thus, as the current body soul leaves, the new tenant enters. The switch is made and the individual feels suddenly different and not at all who they were before, although they will retain most memory in the cellular consciousness of that physical life prior to their entry into it. According to Thoth, such walk-in experiences do occur. However, they happen with less frequency than presently believed. Now, before I start reading this, I want to say neither is Thoth invalidating walk-ins in any sense of the word. It's a genuine experience, and many of you here obviously have had it. But what he's giving us here is a look at what other things, other aspects, other dynamics, that's the word for it, can develop that might be what a person thinks is a walk-in experience, and it might be one of these others. So I'm just going to go for it here. It is assumed that souls trade places in a specific embodiment when both are dissatisfied with their current situation. The current body soul is not able to fully do its work in that lifetime and wishes to move on, and the discarnate soul is in a hurry to become physical with its own purposes, not wishing to go through the tedious stages of birth and maturing. Thoth tells us that this is not so. If such an exchange of realms were allowed to take place exclusively because of these aforementioned reasons, souls would be in a constant exchange, playing musical chairs to the extent that no karmic resolution would be possible. Walking in, or what Thoth prefers to call absulam, means to pass through, is dictated through the command center, or id, as a means for balancing an entire grid of soul placement. When these grids become imbalanced due to karmic saturation, certain tensions must be released through a reordering process. Often this requires rapid transitional methods. In the light of this purpose, there are points upon the grids which become energetically decentralized. This allows a more highly evolved soul to assume the embodiment of one which is in a lesser evolutionary state, so that the grid point that embodiment is holding may become more rapidly activated. A walk-in of the first kind takes place when a soul not previously in the current incarnation comes into the body as the former soul moves out for the above mentioned purposes. However, in a soul lattice, there is a variation of this in a second kind experience, which a soul may move into a lattice in which it was not previously incarnated without any of the other lattice souls moving out at all. So that's an interesting dance right there. I need to drink water. If walk-ins are rarer than we have assumed, then what is it that so many people are experiencing which they might mistake for that condition? There are several different dynamics which can produce effects that will simulate within the mental, emotional experience of the individual the same conditions of a walk-in experience. As previously discussed, souls on rare occasion do change places within the current soul lattice, causing a perceptible difference in the persona of the individual and their actualization of enlightened consciousness. The latter is not truly a walk-in, since all souls of the soul lattice are incarnate together in that one embodiment, no matter what formation they may currently be assuming within it, but it can be mistaken for an absalam experience. Another possibility is simply a quantum burst in consciousness at some higher level, after which the individual feels it must be a new soul that has entered their body. This is usually coupled with a strong subconscious desire to leave behind the identity and perceived mistakes of the past, as well as to become a new and better being instantly. Now, he's not speaking psychologically here, like you have some kind of a psychological thing that you think this and that. He's talking about a real dynamic. So there could be a grace factor involved where the soul is so divinely connected to that experience that they actually are able to quantize it and bring it into reality. A further similar dynamic that is often confused with walk-ins is when an individual accepts a greater part of self into the body to be integrated. This is an even larger movement than a quantum burst in consciousness at higher levels. One does not need to be a part of a soul lattice to have this experience. Remember, a singular soul is but a beam or ray projection of a much more complex magnosoul. Each soul projection perceives only a certain amount of its true dimension, and that amount is dependent on its karmic restrictions. Anytime some of the major restrictions are lifted, the soul will feel greatly expanded and reborn. They will often have the same likes and dislikes they did before. They will often not have the same likes and dislikes as they did before. They will gain an expanded perception and in some cases exhibit talents they did not have previously. They will very often feel a great disassociation from the personality that projected before this expansion occurred. None of these moments should be discredited and are just as viable in the process of soul evolution as is the walk-in. I could go on here, but I don't know what my time is. Does anyone want to tell me how much time I have left?
Yeah, Maya, you have about 30 minutes left.
Oh, really? Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Another condition about which there has been a great deal. Oh, well, I'm not going to get into that. That's going to talk about multiple personalities, and I don't think we really need to go there right now. But there are other things that might be of interest. So let me see what they are. No, I think that's the end of it. And I still have 30 minutes. Whoopee.
You know what? That's okay, because what I'd like for you to do is kind of in a nutshell, if you could sort of summarize what that transmission from Thoth means for walk-ins.
Yes, exactly. Well, just even, looking at it just from the perspective of actually being a walk-in, to understand the dimensional expression of the soul and all the different aspects that are involved. And it's also possible, and I'm sure more than possible, it happens at times, that let's say you are a walk-in and you actually experienced that, and you are a walk-in. You could also, as you're in that new experience and adjusting to the body experience of this soul that hasn't been in that body before, you could also experience a quantum burst or a level of some kind of incarnational miasm that maybe your soul that came in had been carrying with it, but in the act of changing places and coming into this grid, because remember, you're not just doing it, as Thoth says, it's not like, oh, I like to be there and you'd like to be here, let's make a deal. It's not that kind of a thing. There's a greater id factor that's going on. It's, we got to balance this, okay? And everybody's in agreement. Obviously, it's not some kind of a giant manipulation, but the souls are in agreement. That's what they're there for. And they say, okay, let's do this, and move over here. So because that is happening for a greater purpose, a much more dimensional purpose than just, a little parlor dance, then that means that you could possibly be experiencing some of these, one or more of these other things, not all at once, but, as you're adjusting to that body and you're balancing it out so that the dance is complete, the whole spectrum is in balance and the movement can continue from the id. So, I think that's the simplest way to put it, is that to realize that first of all, realizing that a walk-in is a balancing position with a myriad of souls. And the other thing to realize is that you can experience some of these other things, even if you're a walk-in, because you might, be going through a balancing procedure, especially in the first, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 years of that experience. Now, does anybody have any questions? I'm really good when I have questions.
I just want to ask one thing.
Yeah.
Before we end today, I want to have you to please share a little bit about how you became involved with Thoth and what your experience was like growing up. But before we do,
Yeah.
let's see, there was a couple questions that have popped up here. Can a person, and this is, whoops, it keeps moving on me. Can a person, after having gone through a walk-in experience, I think it must be more walk-ins. Is that correct, Hildegard?
In other words, you have one walk in and then it stays for a time, then there's another, etc. like that. Is that what it is now?
I think what happened was she was typing and there's a couple other comments in between. Let me see. Can a person, after having gone through a walk-in experience these bursts as well?
Oh, yes, it's possible. I mean, it's not like an everyday thing, but yes, it can happen. Yes, it's part of the adjustment that now I didn't have that in the article because I didn't know that when I wrote it. But as I was reading it, the Thothic experience came through, the Thothic being, and said, by the way, tell them this. So I just did. Yes. Uh-huh.
And is there a way that someone can access the transmission?
Access what transmission?
Christopher, maybe if you could restate your statement for me, please. Oh, is there a is there a way to access that transmission?
Access the transmissions of what we're speaking about, the quantum bursts or the envelope expanding, that sort of thing. Those come from natural occurrences in the adjustment field of the id. Now, that said, if one is, when one is evolving, I mean, that's the way you do it, is as you're evolving, you're creating a natural field that's expansive. You're creating a systemic situation for that to happen. But you can't just say, I'll have one, please. You have to go through the process of evolution. And as you do with your soul, these things can come into your field because it's part of the evolutionary experience that adjusts that field for you.
Great. And can you speak a little bit to having an incarnation on the surface of the earth and an incarnation on inner earth at the same time, and maybe describe a little bit about what inner earth is?
Yes. Whoa, big topic. Okay. Well, let me kind of reference it in my brain how I can put it simply. First of all, I've been aware of this incarnation that I have as a female in the inner earth for some time, and she was there before I was as Maia. They live a lot longer in there. But the thing to understand about the inner earth, although there are star beings that have bases there that help them out, these are the good guys, and the ones that are their kindred, our kindred. The majority of the beings in inner earth, although we all have star genetics mixed in, they have more, but they're still human beings. They are migrators. They migrated from Atlantis, they migrated from Murray, they migrated from Egypt. Some of them are even more recent. They've gone through the tunnels, have been brought through, not kidnapped, but they've been a part of it. They've wanted to do this. So through the centuries, thousands of years, they built up a huge civilization of different tribes, you could say, of people, but they're all harmonious and they work together. So it's human beings, and I have had some really incredible what I used to call mental projections, because I didn't know the use of the term remote viewing back in the 1970s. So I was given the term by Thoth of mental projection, but it was actually remote viewing too. And I had incredible experiences there. And then, as I wrote about the inner earth extensively, which I have, and I've also talked about it on, I'm going to give a plug here, but I do a video show with Michael Dunn, who acts as the host for this. And it's about every other week. We have a channel called Blue Star Rising. And so anyway, I've been talking about it on those shows as well. But after I originally wrote so much material on it in the 1980s, then, other things came in. I mean, I'd have referred to it now and then, but it was only more recently, like about a year and a half ago, where it came back into my face, so to speak. And I really started communing with my other self in me, that part of myself in the inner earth, and a grouping of souls who were helping me establish and set up a particular project here. I didn't know what the project was that, a year and a half ago. They said they were in my living room putting up grids and things with the crystals, and I'm going, what are you doing? Because it was taking so long. Now I know, because I have the whole thing set up, and I have the quantum cube present in the living room, and things are happening. But when they were doing that, they were coming into my house. They scared my cat, and I saw them, in sort of. And then one of them spoke to me. And then because I was thinking, okay, even though I've been in this a long time, this was the most incredibly real, like thing that had happened. So I was still like, oh, so they said, okay, we're going to leave something for you in the living room. And I walked in the living room. 2 days later, right in front of me, right where I walked to the door, was a ring, a female ring, and I still have it. And it's not mine. And I don't have a lot of people in this house. So anyway, so these things were going on with them as of late, and they were helping me set this up. So they work with people on the surface of the earth, certainly not just me, in different ways to help this planet. And there's a whole program of light around that I don't have time to talk about here. But if you're interested in it, you can contact me at Maya@newearthstar.org, or look at my website, which is newearthstar.org. And also the Blue Star Rising shows on YouTube. So there's a naturally hollow place in the inner earth, where all of this takes place. I guess I can't go any further because it's just such a huge topic. You asked me another question, though. I think I can't remember what it was now.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you very much. Sandy is wondering if I'm correct, that the teachings that you're bringing through, are these the same Thoth of the Emerald Tablets? This is the same Thoth, but different teachings. Is that correct?
My Thoth says he has the Emerald Tablets, but he says the Emerald Tablets are actually sections on a large table, and they were created as a placement of like circuitry on a table. And he goes into a whole detail about that. So I guess I could answer yes, but I don't know if she might be referring to someone else's channelings or whatever, which I couldn't answer to because I haven't read them.
Right. Yeah. There is a Thoth, the Book of Thoth, and there's the Book of the Emerald Tablets.
I've heard of that. Yes, I have not read it purposely because I didn't want I wanted to keep my channel pure, so I didn't go into someone else's material on that.
Beautiful. And can you tell us how you came to be a channel for Thoth?
Well, I guess it's always been true. And because when I was like 5 years old, I was taken through astral projection, I assume, maybe it was physically real, I don't know, at night into a chamber in a mountain. This was in 1957, folks, and on a dairy farm in the Ozarks. I didn't even have any television. So anyway, I was inside this mountain, and there were these tall white boxes with lights on computer towers, okay? But I didn't, of course, know that. And they were showing them to me and telling me how they worked. And they talked to me like one of them. I'm like an adult, not only an adult, but like I was going to know all of this stuff. And apparently I did. I was like, yep, okay. And they were showing all this to me. And these beautiful people, I don't remember that there were any women. There might have been. It's a long time ago, but I remember the men. And they were sort of blondish looking, and they had very tight-skinned white suits on. But they're very genial, nice people, And I came back and I told my mother about it. And my mother was something else. And she said, let me write that down. And she wrote it down. And so I have these notes on this. And one of the things I told her that I was shown in the chamber. Now I'm 5 years old. In 1957, I was told it was a clock controlled by the mind. So this is where it all started, okay? And when I was 17 and 18, the ultra beings started appearing to me in my room, ultra star beings. They said they were preparing me for my mentor. Actually, they called him my benefactor, but I use the term mentor now. They didn't say he was Thoth. They just said a mentor or a benefactor. And they were preparing me for that. And I had health problems. I still do, but I'm still alive and I'm 71. And they took me through a process of healings and whatever. Then they appeared to my mother, who was with me. We shared our lives together. My father died when I was young. So I was, 20, 17, 18, 19 in there. And so they appeared to her at times, and they appeared to us together when we were in the same room on two very rare occasions. We saw the ships. We were told to go outside, and there were the silver discs. We went through all of this. I mean, I could write a book, right? And so that's all played out for 10 years, from 66 to 76. No, from 67 to 77. And in 1977, Thoth came. They said, we're introducing you to your mentor now. You're ready for him, your benefactor. And that's when I started communing with him. And so that's how that all began. And I work, he does have a presence in the inner earth. Thoth does have an embodiment in the inner earth, as well as having been Tosmuzurud, who originally came to earth. I think that's the one that's more written about in the Emerald Tablets. I'm not sure, because as I said, I've only read like 2 or 3 sentences out of that at times. But then he also incarnated in the earth and came with a lot of star genetics and came back as Thoth Racemus of Afra. And he was the one that redid the pyramids when they were, because the original Thoth had the blueprint, brought the blueprint and had them created in Egypt. But the second Thoth, the second incarnation, was there to redo them, reconstruct them after the Great Flood. So that's that. But also, Thoth has a presence in this new Earth reality, and so he's all over the place, like we all are. But he's very known to me in a lot of different ways. And then there's his Akashic record. It's not different from some master beings have their own Akashic record. It's like a little compartment. It has everything else has, but it has it in a particular energy orientation. And so that's the one I reference. So I could reference that Akashic record. And there's also what I call streaming, Thothic streaming. It's just like a streaming beam from his higher intelligence that's not embodied in anything. He once said to me, my consciousness, and I don't, of the ultra being that he calls Ushael, he says, can hold the presence of 100,000 suns. And he wasn't bragging, it's just a fact. He was trying to demonstrate to me the vastness of what, beings on that level can do. But he can be very down to earth and friendly in a way, especially in the inner earth embodiment, because it's more human, So I guess that's all I have to tell you. But I've been with him and with all of this experience consciously for 54 years. And I am 71. And I started, with the experiences as a baby. Actually, I was 9 months old, and I made this strange noise, and my mother knew to take me outside. It was always at night. It was like, and she knew it wasn't a diaper pen or anything. She just knew she had to take me outside. So she took me outside, and I don't know how many times I did this, but at least once I pointed to the heavens and said, star. So I was really doing it the whole time. I've not done anything else. When I was in high school, this 17, just before all this started consciously, I put my hand on the study hall door to go in and wait for the bell to ring. And I got not a voice, but words in my mind very strongly, called my name, and then said, if you go one more day to school, it will be dangerous. Now, I'd always felt that I should not be in school, but I was a good little girl. I went, and I came back to the car. I was not alarmed. It was not an alarming thing. You'd think it would be, but it was not. I had a sense of calm surety. And I came back to the car because my mother was still there. And I got in the car and she said, what's the matter? And I told her. She looked at me and I looked at her and she said, let's go home. And I never went back. And about 3 or 4 months later, it started. And there's a whole story around that. It's a long story. That's how it came about. I began connecting to the Akasha, and then the beings started coming, and both, the whole thing.
Right. And in the book, I write about your interaction with Edgar Mitchell.
Mhm.
Can you share that with people? Because that's a very interesting piece of information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it would have been 1972, and my mother and I were watching TV, and Edgar Mitchell was being interviewed just before he went to the moon. And he said that when he got back, he was going to leave NASA and start a parapsychological institute. He was very interested in parapsychology. Now, you have to realize how long ago that was. And you didn't have people talking about metaphysics even. It was parapsychology, which is the study of possible metaphysical things, very, very brain oriented type work. But to us, we were going, oh my God, because here I sat with all my stuff, that I was already writing. And my mother said, let's send him your science, because I was doing a lot of science then. And so when he got back from the moon, there were all these packages, well, from quarantine, he had to come back from the moon, then he went to quarantine. And when he got out, he said, he told my mother, because she was the one that answered the phone when he called, that there was all these packages. And he said, I would never have I couldn't open all those things. I wouldn't even bothered. My secretary was going to handle it. If there's anything important, she'd let me know. She said, but I saw your package. He was talking to my mother because she fixed it, mailed it. And he said, I put my hand on that package and I had to open it. So he did. And when he read it, some of my sciences, he said, this is the real deal. He said, it's far beyond what we're working with now. Of course, that was then. Now we've gotten to see empowerment and all this, but that was then. And he was the one that had the most scientific credentials at the time among the astronauts. So he said, I want to take a look at this, So he paid for my mother and I to come back and forth. See, we lived in San Antonio then, very conveniently, as from San Antonio to Houston to NASA. And we got to go through the gates for the first time and drive into NASA because he was meeting us in there, not representing NASA, but just, meeting us there. And other times we met at his apartment, and he had this little small group of students that were going to become the basis of his parapsychological institute, which was later called, of course, a Noetics, the Noetics Foundation. So, our institute. Anyway, so he worked with me a little bit and tried to get formulas out of this. Well, he was getting a little disappointed in the formula part of it, because again, think how long ago this was. Now it would not be that big a deal. But then when I said to him, I said something, and he said, "Oh, well, that's past the speed of light." And I said, "Yeah, that is." and I'll never forget. He kind of run. He was redheaded then, and he had a little red goatee. And he said, "Well," he said, "Christine, that was my name. Christine, the speed of light is no small potatoes." But so it went down that track. And so finally, he knelt in front of me. My mother was sitting one chair and I was in the other. He knelt down in front of me, and he said, "Christine, you're the most exciting thing I've come across so far in his studies." He said, "But," he said, "I can see that in order to get anything out of this in any practical form, I would have to devote my life to it." And he said, "I've got my life planned already. I can't do that." He was really nice about it. And strangely enough, I wasn't that disappointed. I kind of knew that his presence in my life was giving me validity, not for others so much as it was for me. Oh, I'm not crazy. This is something I need to continue, And so that's what it did for me. And I did continue it.
Beautiful. Are there any final words that you would like to share with our audience?
Yes, I'm involved in a project that Thoth has given me to be a part of, which she's calling the Quantum Cube Logica. And it's just beginning to get going. There are other people involved. It has to do with the connection to the inner earth, but it's a very scientific program. It has hardware involved, which comes out of Switzerland. It's called the 9010 technology, which I'm using, Thoth is having me use to integrate with what he calls the hierophant cube in the inner earth. It's for a lot. Well, you can do quite a bit with it. It's a quantum cube program, a quantum program. But the essence of it is broadcasting signals from the inner earth into the field of earth, not to control anything by any means, but is a part of a natural universal experience that allows the planet to be released, or at least to some degree, from the terrible archonic influences we're going through right now. In fact, the push is big. I just received a template to put in there that's working for the next few weeks with all that's going on the planet right now. And it's not just me. We have a group that are gathering, and we have other people that have gotten the cube. The cube's rather expensive, but they managed to do it. And we're all working together in this. And you don't have to have a cube to do this. You can be a part of it. It's an expanding field. This is, so long as we have enough cubes to activate it, it all comes together. So again, if you're interested in even doing that, just contact me.
And one last question I should have asked before. Can you share with people your connection with Templars and the temples?
Yes. Throughout my experience with Thoth, occasionally he would bring up the word Templar. And I wasn't particularly interested in the Templars, personally, but he would bring this up. And he even had me call a little group that I had back in Texas, zillion years ago in the 80s. He named them the ISIS Templars. And so as this went along at that time, and then things happened, and I moved on and whatever. But then the Templars came back into my experience, and in ways I won't go into right now, but as a very profound feeling that that energy was connecting to Atlantis and to other places in cosmos. And then I met Michael Dunn, and he is very Templar involved. And so we established, he's the Calic of it, both calls him the Calic, the Johannine Templars. And it's not something that people join or whatever. Right now, it's just a small group of us, and we're just holding the sacred, for the planet, for us, for the planet, what we can do. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your taking time to be with us today. Your knowledge is so vast. I mean, the information that you have, what you have accumulated, you have a vault of information. And I'm going to get back on that project we talked about.
yeah, for sure. And can you share the link, my website link and my email address with people? Is there a way to do that?
Sure. I'll put it in, I'll put everything in the chat for people. Okay.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening to me. Bye-bye.